Hey everybody, it's Swank Ivy again. I'm back with another Letters to an Asexual. This is number 36. And as per usual these days, my letter is going to be on the long side, so I'm not going to take up very much time talking to you beforehand. But first of all, I want to say that the basic subject of this is the idea that you cannot know if you would like sex until or unless you have sex, and also that you're kind of obligated to give it a try. That's not quite what the person that I'm arguing with says, but he does kind of come to the conclusion that I haven't proved anything by what I have experienced, and that's kind of the thrust of what's going on in our conversation, as you'll see as I read it to you. The conversation is between me and someone else on OKCupid, and I have cut out a bunch of the conversation that was about other stuff, so it may seem really abrupt at the beginning, but just know that there was other stuff about religion and philosophy and personal stuff interspersed. So we were having like a real conversation at first. And also you should know, slight trigger warning here, I am going to talk about a couple of intimate experiences that I have gone into, and they're not really explicit, but I do mention them specifically. And also I do mention a coercive situation where somebody tried to talk me into doing intimate things with him under the threat that he would consider suicide if I did not. So just so you know, I'm going to mention that in the conversation. Hopefully that will not bother too many people. So let's begin with the first thing that the person sent to me. I remember also that I said this was among other things. This is the relevant part of what he said to me after saying hi. He says, "I've never really known or talked to anyone who was asexual before. I'm pretty curious about some things. If you don't feel comfortable talking about these sorts of things, that's fine, but I figure that's a given. I also figure you probably aren't too shy about this sort of thing. Have you ever had sex? I have a feeling you must have at some point. Do you ever masturbate?" And keep in mind, this was the first time he had written to me. I guess sometimes people just feel like they can say anything to me or ask anything because I'm really open about stuff on my profiles and in my videos and stuff, and they feel like they can ask me something like that. And I still feel like they should ask if they should ask before they go into the personal questions, but at the same time I do talk a lot about asexuality related stuff, so I guess I kind of understand why they think it's okay to just hit me with these really personal questions. So here's my response. I said, "Hi. Regarding any questions you might have on asexuality, I guess you can go ahead and ask. I doubt you would be disrespectful about it. I do think it's very weird that you ask if I've had sex and then say you have a feeling I must have. Why? I'll answer your question if you'd please answer mine about why you have a feeling that you already know the answer. Masturbation isn't interesting to me because I don't feel that I have a sex drive or any reason to do it. That's not something you can generalize amongst asexuals, but it's my answer." And he says, "The reason I said I thought you must have had sex is because I'd be surprised if at some point in your 30-plus years you hadn't given it a shot. You strike me as the sort of person who would have had to have tested this thing out to see what it was like and if you could enjoy it at all. Not necessarily because everyone else is doing it, but because I think sex has sort of evolved to be an activity humans enjoy. I was trying to imagine having no sex drive, and it made me think it's possible you could still enjoy the physical sensations, etc." So I said hi again. "Interesting that you'd figured I'd have to have given it a shot. Sex, I mean. My answer is no, I haven't had sex. Here's some philosophy on that, though. First, I've been aware that I'm not interested in sex for a long time, starting from around the same time most people realize they are interested in sex. When I was a teen, I pretty much expected that when I was older, I'd feel sexual attraction toward someone. But I wasn't really worried about it. It didn't bother me to think I might never have it happen, though given the odds, I figured maybe one day it would. So when I was about 16, I ended up in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship that I didn't want to be in. Long story, but to sum it up, the guy was very important to me, but I didn't like him in a way he wanted me to like him. And therefore, every time I turned him down for an exclusive relationship, he made it clear he was thinking of killing himself. I didn't really know how to deal with that as a naive teen, but when the guy promised that he wasn't expecting a physical relationship and just wanted an acknowledgement that he was more than a friend, I agreed to let him call me his girlfriend. Of course, the "no, I won't try to change this into a physical relationship" promise evaporated within a week, and now his excuse is, "Oh, but if you're my girlfriend and I try to get sex somewhere else, I'm cheating on you." He didn't like it when I told him to go ahead and cheat, but that's another story. Anyway, the point of me telling you this is that I knew I wasn't attracted to him, but people, especially him, but many others, kept telling me, "If you don't try it, how do you know?" I trusted my instincts, and I knew that I didn't feel attracted to him, but nevertheless I did let him try some things he wanted to try, and he was always offended and appalled and disappointed when I tried them with him and my feelings didn't change. You know, a lot of guys believe they have a magic wand that will change a frigid girl into a raging nympho, and his confidence was shattered when his ministrations were all for naught. I did not enjoy kissing, petting, necking, or any of those other lovely things other people seem to enjoy, and I'm very relieved that I didn't let him wear me down into trying sex with him. Again, as a naive teen, I thought this had proved something. Okay, I thought, they said I had to try it to know whether I liked it. I tried, didn't like, what now? Well, what now was this. You have to try it again. You have to try it with a different person. You have to try this, and this, and this. You're being closed-minded. So basically what I realized was that there are some people who won't accept that for me the answer was no. They expect that the only reasonable outcome is for me to be dead set against it, followed by me trying it and realizing everyone else was right all along and I did love it. Not so. Find a negative outcome? Guess I just didn't do it right or with the right person. Proving a negative is impossible. After my relationship with this guy dissolved, through various guilt trips and other loveliness of course, including sleeping with my best friend, which was okay with me, and I think that was the nail in the coffin because he had done it to make me jealous and I was not. I decided it was best to just follow my instincts. Most women like the lead-ups and foreplay stuff better than the actual sex, so I doubt I'd suddenly turn on like a light bulb when the penetrative sex part started. And by the way, that's just what I've heard, is that a lot of ladies seem to like the lead-up more than they like the actual sex. I don't know how true that is, honestly. Anyway, again, since I can't prove a negative, I'm left with just following my inclinations, and none of those have, so far, pushed me toward wanting sex with someone. What you also have to understand is that just try it, you might like it, is not a possibility with all people. For example, there are a great many heterosexual men in the world who do not believe they have to try sex with another guy before they can be very, very sure that they would not like it. They do not see men in a sexual context. They feel they would know it if they were attracted to other men, and while they might not be offended or grossed out by the idea of gay men existing or doing their thing, if a gay guy came up and started proposing those things, or worse yet, applying them, I think it's possible that the straight guy would even have a disgust reaction. And that's how it is for me with everyone. I don't feel attraction toward them, and in my admittedly limited experience going through with it anyway, I mostly just had to choke down the bile and think about something else until it was over, probably somewhat similar to a straight guy who's sexually repulsed by men being told he should just try to get into it when he's getting a blowjob from another guy, not easy. I don't see the point, because there isn't any burning desire for me to find fulfillment for myself through a relationship of this nature, and I don't care enough about what other people think of me to force myself into a relationship that involves sex just so I can be accepted as normal. No matter what I do, I can't prove a negative, and I refuse to believe that I owe anyone any justification for my orientation. So, as for one other point you made, regarding maybe you could still enjoy this physical sensations, I suppose again it is possible, but not likely to be rewarding in my experience. If someday I discover that I have an inclination to stimulate myself, I suppose I can buy a vibrator. In the past, when the aforementioned boyfriend was doing his very best to excite me with his hand in my pants, I found it mostly awkward and uncomfortable, and very much just wanted him to leave me alone and stop breathing on me and whining about why I didn't like it. So, his response is this. I'm actually somewhat surprised, but I think your first exposure toward sex was pretty poor. Not saying that you'd just be in love with sex if you hadn't gone through with that with your first boyfriend, but there's no way anybody wouldn't be demoralized after that sort of thing. The thing that strikes me most is that even someone who could very well enjoy sex, in general, or conceivably might, would not respond well to that sort of introduction to it. For instance, I'm not interested in having sex with people I consider morons, immature, or I just don't relate to them in other important ways, even if they're physically attractive. And then he quotes me from the above, saying, again, as a naive teen, I thought I had proved something, and okay, I thought they said I had to try it to know whether I liked it. I tried, didn't like, what now? Well, what now was this. This thing in particular. Now, from what you say, you basically have never had a sex drive. And that I believe and understand. I think, though, that trying sexual stuff with someone who was basically not providing a healthy and mutual sort of atmosphere doesn't really prove too much. Especially since you were young and probably quite a bit different in many respects at the time of it. I understand some people will say dumb shit about how you're not doing it right, but I think in this case in particular, your attempt doesn't really confirm you couldn't enjoy sex. Though you still seem relatively open-minded as far as what the future could hold in this respect. I do find it a little amusing imagining your boyfriend cheating on you with your friend and thinking, this'll show her, and then you finding out and not giving a damn. It was probably a lot more stupid to actually experience, however. And then he quotes me again, maybe I could still enjoy the physical sensations, but I could buy a vibrator. Did you never masturbate or try to as a kid? It sounds like you didn't, because I figure you'd have a more concrete answer about the physical sensations question. You cite your boyfriend failing in this regard, and I have to say, that is not very clear evidence. There are plenty of women who wouldn't know how to give a hand job that felt good, for instance, and guys are stereotypically easy to get off. But more than that, masturbation is just a lot different than someone else touching you. You say it was awkward and uncomfortable, and that strikes me as much more of a mental thing than physical, though they definitely affect one another plenty. If you aren't really up for the act, and you feel like you're trying this for the other person, then of course your reaction is not going to be a good one. Please don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying I know you would actually like sex and you're just being naive, but from the experiences you've shared, I don't find it to be very conclusive at all. So let me just interject here that he's not exactly telling me that I need to do these things, but he is suggesting that I didn't prove it. And like, I never said I proved anything. So that's kind of the crux of why I'm irritated about this. Because hand in hand with the idea that I haven't proved it is the idea that I should. Or that I shouldn't make any statements about it until I have proved it. So my response probably came out sounding pretty negative and maybe a little aggressive, but you'll see what I said. So, not to be insulting or anything, but way to miss the point, man. My point was, I can't prove I'm asexual through repeatedly not liking experiences, and furthermore, I shouldn't be expected to. So, you telling me a bunch of times that what I did doesn't prove anything kind of sucks, because that was kind of part of my point. Basically, even though you didn't say so explicitly, you're expressing here that part of the reason I feel the way I do about sex, or part of the reason I'm confident in saying so, is that I got turned off to it at an early age by a bad experience. I wasn't demoralized by, your words, what turned out to be a poor match with a very sexual guy. I already wasn't interested in sex before he got there. And the only reason I did as much as I did with him is that I listened to what the rest of the world said and believed that I couldn't know, or at least couldn't have proof that was satisfactory to others, if I didn't compromise. This was not a case of me thinking I should try it once just to make sure, and then swearing off it forever if I didn't like it. This was a case of me responding to what everyone said, instead of listening to myself. It gave me a glimpse of what happens when one doesn't listen to oneself, and it clued me in that I should have been doing that all along. This kind of introduction to it was a guy saying I should have sex when I did not want to do anything of the sort. It's very easy for someone to assign this boyfriend the blame for my unwillingness to try again, but you need to understand he was pretty much just a bystander. He was something I shouldn't have done, and really the point is that I shouldn't have even had to try anything with him to be able to tell people that I'm qualified to describe my own feelings. My lack of sexual attraction to others isn't something I'm required to test over and over until I've left a string of unsatisfying experiences, and possibly broken hearts, behind me. I know 0 straight guys who feel like they had to sleep with a bunch of different men to be pretty damn sure they're not gay. And the difference between me and them is that nobody sends them messages asking them to examine and re-examine their sexuality, complete with field experiments, until they end up telling the outside world whatever it is they want to hear. Now, say we live in an alternate universe where gay is the more common sexuality and a nevertheless straight guy is raised amidst expectations to be gay. He feels straight, but receives consistent messages that he's probably mistaken and is regularly approached by men who want him to experiment. He does a couple times and only finds disgust and discomfort. Is he wrong to not keep trying, even though he knew before he experimented that this wasn't for him? Who does he owe? People don't like hearing that I'm asexual, and I'm fine with that. They want to find a pathological reason behind it, or encourage me to try other things, or suggest my situation is sad, or give me heaps of advice on what I should be doing other than being completely happy with my sexuality the way it is. I don't understand what the motivation here is. This girl says she's happy, but I know she can't be, so I have to fix her. I know sex is awesome, so I think she needs to share my interest in it. I'm convinced this girl has a chip on her shoulder because she tends to get a little shirty when people constantly tell her her observations on her own life aren't sufficient. I'm very much in touch with my inner landscape, so to speak. It's probably partly because of this that I find it baffling whenever people make such far-out conclusions about me based on what they think I should feel or want me to feel. I really do wish you and others who say the same things as you would trust me to be the authority on my experiences. If I ever develop sexual attraction towards someone, I feel sure I would recognize it. I also feel sure that I haven't experienced it. I'm fine with that. I really am. I had a boyfriend before the boyfriend I told you about, too. He never pressured me for anything. We held hands sometimes, and I didn't even like that, and we tried kissing a few times because he wanted to, but I didn't get anything out of it. He just didn't push. And we were, after all, pretty young, only 14 or 15, and the whole thing was pretty much a lukewarm first start to dating. I wasn't attracted to him either, but the difference there is that he didn't try to change that. The whole tone of your message suggests that you still believe I have a burden of proof on me. I said before, and I'll say again, that there is no way to prove a negative, and that I don't feel I proved anything by going as far as I did with that guy, so much as I proved to my satisfaction that I didn't need proof and could not conceivably get proof. You brought up many times how my experiences were not conclusive. But think about that for a second. What in your mind would a conclusive proof of a negative look like? What right does anyone have to say, I owe justification for my lifestyle anyway? Bottom line is, since you can't prove a negative, no matter how many times I came out of such interactions not enjoying myself, people would keep telling me some excuse for why it didn't work for me. Sometimes they'd blame me, sometimes they'd blame the partner, sometimes they'd blame the situation, or the circumstance, or the particular act that we did. But it never seems to occur to these people that if the answer really is, this girl doesn't like any of these acts, mainly because she does not have the inclination to carry them out, it will look, well, it will look about like this. You're looking at her. You said you could believe and understand my lack of a sex drive, but then followed it with a statement about what you apparently don't believe about me. I'm certainly not trying to confirm that I can't enjoy sex. I'm saying I don't have the inclination, don't see people in a sexual context, and resent being told that I owe it a good college try anyway. You said that I seem relatively open-minded about the situation, but that's because I'm well aware that saying otherwise could suggest I'm dogmatic about it. I didn't decide not to feel sexually toward others. I simply know that I don't, and that I haven't in the past. And past and present tend to be good predictors for the future. Since I have not met every person in every context, I absolutely can't say it isn't possible for me to feel attraction. That would be unscientific. But I don't expect to. And I'm not going to go through life focusing on this thing that has never seemed important to me and obsess over why it hasn't appealed to me. Nor am I going to repeatedly, deliberately put myself in situations where maybe it could happen, as if this deserves to be the focus of my life. To bring up the hypothetical straight guy again, I don't think he's going to be plagued with recurring thoughts about why he isn't gay, and in what contexts he could enjoy gay sex, and repeatedly go out to gay bars or engage in gay relationships just to make sure there's not something there that he was missing. Might there be? Sure. Is it likely? No. And does he owe the world of gay men that chance, even though he personally has never experienced any personal reason to think such things might have a home in his life? No. Does this sound like an absurd example? only if you have convinced yourself that asexuals aren't the same as other people and don't deserve the acknowledgement of competence afforded to sexual people, or even the benefit of the doubt. And I don't use that word sexual, but that was like how he was using it. So anyway, continuing. Regarding your assessment of my not very clear evidence over my boyfriend failing to stimulate me, yet again here I see the nope, you didn't prove it, so you still have to attitude shining through. So if you want to avoid sounding like I do in fact have to prove a case before I get to be trusted on matters of my own experiences, maybe take a look at what your language insinuates here. Your word choices here suggest that in your mind, your sexuality is the default, and any other orientation needs to be proved legitimate by your standards, of course. Regarding my boyfriend failing to stimulate me, the awkward and uncomfortable situation arises directly from having someone I wasn't attracted to getting very into what he was doing and being attracted to me. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at when I say it wasn't a good experience. I imagine it'd be a lot less awkward if I was attracted to the person, but since we've established that that hasn't ever happened to me, we're at an impasse of sorts. I didn't mean to keep bringing up the same points, but I doubt a straight guy feeling awkward and uncomfortable while being given a hand job by a man would be revealing anything about his psyche except that he isn't attracted to men. Sound familiar? It should. I'm not attracted to men either. Oh, and regarding the boyfriend cheating with my best friend, I even gave them permission. Figured it would get his ass off my back, but considering he just wanted me to show my jealous rage like a normal girlfriend, it backfired on him when I said they could continue if they wanted. What I feel and what others expect me to feel are two different things. So he responded, beginning by quoting me, saying, "You're saying I got turned off to sex by a bad experience." And he said, "I didn't express anything of the sort, actually. I meant what I said. You really look like you're projecting things here, because all I said was that nobody would have responded well to the situation you talked about. Nowhere did I say, this is why anything. I tried to make sure you wouldn't misconstrue what I was saying by prefacing it with things like not saying you'd be in love with sex just because you hadn't gone through that with your first boyfriend. In fact, I prefaced almost every single controversial thing I thought you might take the wrong way with something similar, but I guess it didn't work. I suppose you just thought I was saying something along the lines of 'I'm not racist, but' sort of statement. The purpose of anything involving the words proof or conclusiveness was simply to point out that your examples of supporting evidence for not liking sex or masturbation were just that, not really conclusive of anything. I wasn't saying you aren't asexual or anything like that, and I definitely wasn't suggesting you should go out and do anything you don't want to do. Let me elaborate on what I mean with the proof stuff. For example, I asked you originally if you had considered that you might still enjoy masturbation, and you brought up not liking someone else stimulating you. Did you really just say you don't think you'd like masturbation just because you didn't enjoy someone else touching you in a situation you didn't want to be in? Now, again, I'm not saying you should or must or better start masturbating right now. What I'm saying is you shouldn't be getting defensive because I pointed out that disliking what happened with your boyfriend has nothing to do with masturbation and whether or not you'd like it. I didn't understand why you thought that justified your hunch that you wouldn't enjoy masturbating. Touching yourself is a lot different than being touched by others. I just don't think not enjoying sex with one person in a shitty situation was enough to define your sexuality. Now, I think in hindsight, you weren't really even using that story as supporting evidence for your asexuality, but more of a consequence of it. Realize, though, that I wasn't saying you aren't asexual because you haven't proven that you are to my satisfaction. I was just saying that the situation you described would have been unpleasant for anyone, and like I said, doesn't really mean you couldn't enjoy sex on its own. The biggest thing to realize is I never told you how you should feel or what you should do. You say you've never felt attracted to anyone and that you've never had a sex drive. I get that. But it made me wonder and consider that you might still enjoy sex, physically or something like that. Which is also sort of related to the thought that you might enjoy masturbation also. This does not mean I think you're deluded or not asexual or any of that. The thing you misunderstood was me trying to demonstrate that you seem to be pointing to the experiences you had with your boyfriend as something that supports your theory that sexual things aren't enjoyable for you. What I said was specifically that your response to the situation with your boyfriend doesn't prove that you couldn't enjoy sex. specifically and only because it was a shitty situation that no one would respond well to. I'm not saying you should enjoy sex or that you would, but simply that I don't think you can really use that as supporting evidence for that theory. What I'm not saying is that you don't have plenty of other reasons to think you're asexual. I just don't think what happened with your boyfriend carries much weight. Also, you said you didn't like holding hands. Do you like touching people in any context, hugs and stuff? Because holding hands seems pretty far from sexual. And while I appreciate that this guy is not saying that I need to do this and that this is some imperative in my life, that's a nice change, he is still saying that I didn't prove it. And like, did I ever say anything about that I proved anything? I don't know. So here's what I said. I know you weren't trying to deny that I'm asexual. I didn't suggest that. And I know you didn't suggest I'd be loving sex these days if I hadn't had one bad experience. But even though I recognize that you were prefacing everything touchy with disclaimers, it looks to me like you're addressing points I didn't make. If you thought I was trying to make those points and still think so, you've misunderstood me. In a way, I'm pretty used to being misunderstood. I wasn't offering stories of my boyfriend experiences or expressions of my attitudes because I'm trying to prove anything. My point, overall, was that I did not need proof, and in fact couldn't have proof if the conclusion was the null set. As Carl Sagan said, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Despite that, almost everything you said in response to my asshole boyfriend story amounted to, that doesn't prove a thing. And in my mind, though this may be too black and white and understanding, I don't know, there are only two likely ways that a statement can be understood. One, the way I assumed, would be that you were suggesting I therefore have no evidence for my current position and ought to be getting some proof, or at least should have tried more times or tried harder to get it before giving up. Evidently, that doesn't reflect what you were trying to say. So my other option comes to mind, that you didn't think I was suggesting my experience constituted proof that it was enough. I was really hoping that you didn't think I was so simplistic as to believe my story constituted any sort of proof for why I'm really asexual. So please tell me you do get my point. Please tell me you know the difference between I proved it and I don't need to prove it. And that you don't think I needed to be told unpleasant petting with a crappy boyfriend doesn't constitute proof that I wouldn't like sex. Because seriously, that's kind of obvious for me. I had no illusion that I was proving anything by telling you this stuff. It was a story that helped explain my growth toward understanding what other people expect of me and why other people's standards for my behavior don't mean diddly squads. I understand that masturbation isn't the same thing as having someone else touch you, and yes, I brought up my boyfriend trying to stimulate me in that context because a lot of people have tried to tell me that I would see the light if I was willing to allow for genital contact. Most people will try to tell me that I wouldn't be able to help getting turned on, or that whether I was attracted or not, I would like getting stimulated. So this was my attempt to show you that I'd been in situations where sensation is separate from attraction, and of course, that neither did anything for me. I guess that's why your argument sounded weird to me, because you didn't know why I would connect those two things and were focused on why I would compare masturbation to a guy putting his hand in my pants. Well, that's why. But I have to point out that you're still going on with this whole, you didn't justify your hunch thing. I didn't say I wouldn't/couldn't enjoy masturbation. I said that I did not and do not have a need to engage in it. And that if someday that changes, I suppose I will too. Having someone else try to excite me that way is really the only example I have of not finding anything worthwhile in the experience, but I'm not dragging it out to prove anything. In any case, I'm not sure why we're even talking about masturbation, since it's not really important whether I ever do it or not. You wrote this, which suggests you didn't understand at the time of my last letter, but possibly understand now. I think in hindsight, you weren't really even using that story as supporting evidence for your asexuality, but more a consequence of it. Well, exactly, but in case I haven't said this enough ways yet, there is no way to prove a negative, so continuing to collect evidence of situations where nothing happened is not going to do anything to work toward conclusive proof of asexuality. After all, a gay person can say, I'm gay, after having a same-sex attraction, and will probably continue to say, I'm gay, if no different sex attraction occurs. But that person hasn't proved they're gay. Gay just describes that person's past and present. Based on how that gay person feels, making a statement like, I am not bisexual or straight, is likely to be true. But saying, I could never and will never be attracted to a different sex is a dogmatic statement. I assure you that I am not doing that. I am also trying to tell you that my crappy boyfriend experience was A, probably as crappy as it was, partly because I was asexual and he was very sexual, and B, not something I feel proves I'm asexual by some objective standard. But regarding this quote of yours, realize though that I wasn't saying you aren't asexual because you haven't proven that you are to my satisfaction. I'm just saying that the situation you described would have been unpleasant for anyone, and like I said, doesn't really mean you couldn't enjoy sex on its own. End quote. Okay, I understand that you're explicitly not asking me to prove it, but that you are also not so explicitly telling me there are possible or probable situations in which I, an aromantic, asexual person with no inclination in that direction, could still like sex, even though sex necessarily involves another person, and we've established that I'm not attracted to other people. I'll be frank with you here. I've been pretty open all along that I, of course, don't know the future, and there might be a person out there who could do something sexual to me that I would like. But can you look at this in a more realistic context, please? I keep bringing up these hypothetical people, but I would really like it if you'd examine what I'm asking here on behalf of your stereotypical heterosexual, not ever been bi-curious guy, and tell me whether you think you agree with what I think he'd say. So here we have a straight guy who'd never dream of wanting a dude to suck his dick, grab his ass, or give or receive anal sex. Would you tell this straight guy, who has no history of homosexuality and who claims to not be attracted to guys whatsoever, any of these things? 1, just because you've never been attracted to a guy doesn't mean you couldn't enjoy gay sex. 2, I'd think at your age you'd have at least tried sex with people you're not at all attracted to. 3, the times guys tried to pressure you for sex obviously weren't mutually comfortable situations. There could still be a guy-on-guy situation where you'd feel safe and have a more positive experience. Those are all things you've basically said to me, except that my sexual attraction happens to be absent toward all people, not just my same gender. You've got to put yourself in my shoes and realize that I really have zero attraction to other people, and that suggesting I could still enjoy these things, or that it's kind of surprising that I haven't sought out an experience I do not want, is very much like treating a straight man like he's weird for not pursuing or being open to gay sex. I'll reiterate that I know you're not saying you should try it, but I do think you're saying I shouldn't write it off. I think it's fair to say that I should feel justified, a word you seem to kind of like, in writing it off, as long as I feel this way. I expect to feel this way the rest of my life, and sure, if that changes, I will too. But just like most people, my orientation isn't likely to change. It's not a void or a hole left to fill, any more than heterosexuality is defined by lack of homosexual attraction. Unless there was something I felt like I was achieving or satisfying by going after these experiences despite having no attraction, and yeah, some asexual people do that for their own reasons, I think it makes a hell of a lot more sense to do what I'm doing than to do the alternative, don't you? And then he also has, when he quoted me, what I'm not saying is that you don't have plenty of other reasons to think you're asexual. I just don't think what happened with your boyfriend carries much weight. And I say, good. Since I wasn't using my boyfriend experience to illustrate how real my asexuality is, I think we're on the same page here. And yeah, lack of sexual attraction to anyone, anytime, ever, suggests I fit the textbook definition of asexuality, so that's why I used the label. And to answer your last question about holding hands and touching, I would say I'm very much not a touchy-feely person. Don't care for cuddling or lots of physical contact. I'm not a big fan of sustained contact. There are exceptions, though. If someone's good at it, I like massages and back scratches, and there are certain people I feel comfortable leaning on for a while, especially if it's for warmth. I get cold easily. And hugs are awesome. I don't like there to be another body in my bed, though, or anyone putting their arm around me or their hand on my leg or something. I don't like getting breathed on, so that might be part of it. And I don't have any more in this conversation, so I think that it ended there. He probably just didn't write me back, but so that's an example of like a slightly more reasonable conversation that I had, and also I probably brought to the table some comments and some attitudes that I've collected by having people misunderstand me a lot. So, you know, I hope that I didn't read too much into what he was saying, but every time I looked at what he said, he was still saying, well, you haven't proved anything. You haven't proved that you couldn't like sex. And I don't see the reason for someone to keep saying that unless they're either extremely dogmatic about the word proof or really invested in the idea that I need to be more open about sex. And, you know, he kept insisting that I wasn't being told that I needed to experiment, but I don't know what he wanted me to admit or what he thought he was getting through to me by saying those things. But it's just, I guess it kind of all goes back to his sort of entitlement feeling, like that he's allowed to ask a question of a stranger about whether they masturbate, and he kind of also has that perspective on what I should be seeking out in my life, like what is normal, I guess. And I think it's also kind of telling that he knew that I was in my 30s and just assumed that being an open-minded or reasonable person means, of course, I would have tried sex. And I really think the bottom line is people don't realize I just intensely do not desire it and do not find the pressures around it in society to be attractive or compelling. So I just honestly don't think it sounds interesting, and I think that some people think that this is like a psychological thing where because people have hyped it up so much, I'm digging my heels in. But you know, most of the other things people tell me are great, like are things that I was at least curious about or anxious to try. But I don't know. It's just if it has to do with sex, and people are really invested in their own perspectives on it, and especially if it's really valuable to them, they have a hard time imagining that I might not want to see if it's valuable to me too, to the point that they almost might even take it as a personal insult or something that's really baffling to them. So anyway, that one was pretty long and I think kind of repetitive, so I'm just going to cut it off right there and hope it wasn't too obnoxious for you. So I will talk to you guys next time I make a video, and thanks for watching.